My, this thing must be massive. Look at the size of this box, man. Oh, it's so cute. Look at this guy. Look at him. And then look at this box again. My. All that box to get to an unbranded C2C cable and some thumbsticks. Oh boy.
And now for a public service announcement to the people who priced this device.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs. If you do them, you're bad. Because drugs are bad, okay? It's a bad thing to do drugs, so don't be bad.
Hey everyone, Josh Fifth Wheel Gamer here, and welcome back to the channel. Let me just turn off the vacuum cleaner here. Give me just 1 second. We have to go to our performance settings and fan mode. And there we go. Alright, that is much better, isn't it? Okay, so now that we have the vacuum cleaner turned off, this is the Ayaneo Pocket S Mini. And I've got a lot of good things to say about this device, and I got a lot of bad things to say about this device. Or maybe they're not bad, maybe they're just a little underwhelming in some areas, but then there's other areas where it's like, man, they really knocked it out of the park with this thing. And so, first of all, I wanted to go over something that Russ from Retro Game Core had talked about when he reviewed this device, is the fact that it seems as though Ayaneo basically took the same screen that they had in the Ayaneo Pocket Air Mini and just decided to drop it into this premium price device right here, which is the Pocket S Mini. Okay, so we're talking about the difference between a $120 device versus a $320 device, or more, depending on where you get this device from. So before I get off into the weeds with all that stuff, let's take a trip to Specktown as usual. And so, this device is rocking the Snapdragon G3X Gen 2 chipset. Now, Ayaneo's been using this chipset for quite some time. When AYN Odin launched the Odin 2, they launched it with a regular Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and Ayaneo was like, you know what, we gotta show ourselves to be different than these guys, and so we're gonna launch a different variation, and so a supposedly more gaming-focused version of the same chipset, pretty much, is what it seems like to me. And so there are slight differences in performance between the two of them. I do believe that overall the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 has the better driver support, but you know, we're not going to split hairs on that. The performance is roughly the same. So, going into the screen on this device has a 4.2-inch 1280 by 960p display. And like I said, that is essentially the same display that was in the Pocket Air Mini. So a budget device, and they're charging a premium price for this device. And I think that really what you're paying for is the chipset that's in this device, because even with this device being premium, they didn't exactly put the largest battery in the world for something so powerful. This thing has a 4700 milliamp hour battery in it. But going around the device, you know, let's have a look about, shall we? We have our power button up here. We have some extra mappable buttons up here up top. We have our volume rocker up and down right here. We of course have our L1 and R1 and our L2, R2, which are analog, even though it's a very limited range of motion on the analogs there, but it's still very comfortable to hold, surprisingly, because of the density of this device and the overall shape of it. Your thumb just kind of rests here. And so for racing games or for first-person shooters, third-person shooters, you're going to be actually pretty comfortable, which is kind of surprising. Normally, when you have a dual joystick at the bottom like this, normally that gets cramped up for a lot of people. But to me, I didn't really see any problems with it. So the D-pad on this device is kind of reminiscent of a Vita D-pad. It looks like a Vita D-pad. However, when you immediately start feeling it, you don't hear micro switches. So Apart from that, we have our Hall sensing joysticks here, which, you know, in the beginning of the video, I did show that they buried in this super tall box that they have. Okay, they did send some extra thumb caps that are slightly larger, so these do pop off and are replaceable, and that's real nice and fine and good. So anyways, one thing about this device, and it was something I'd complained about on a previous device, except on the previous device that I'd used, the Ayaneo Conquer Pocket Fit, it had buttons up at the top for start and select, and I was able to remap them as so. However, on this device, there is no start and select button up here, as you can see. And so your start and select is down here. So you have your select here, your start here, and then you have an Ayaneo button here, as well as like a home button right here. So there are no mappable buttons on the back this time around because we already have them up top. Now, you do have active cooling here on the back, and we can go ahead and peel this ugly sticker on the back. Watch me tear it right here on a video. Oh, look at me, I'm so good, I got it without ripping it. Super. So yeah, you do have active cooling, and as you heard in the very beginning, it gets loud. This thing can really cook when it comes to using that active cooling. Now, jumping into these face buttons, okay, these are pretty nice and quiet face buttons with a decent amount of travel. They almost bottom out, but not really quite bottoming out. But, you know, overall, I would say that this device is a pretty quiet device. All of your menu buttons are quiet. Even your little mappable buttons up here up top are not really that loud. And so I give them a plus on that. The loudest part of the whole device is your L3 and R3 click-ins. Check it out. Okay, now compare that to the budget device they came out with, the Ayaneo Pocket Air Mini. Okay. So same situation there where, you know, the L3 and R3 are about the loudest things on it, except this device, even though this device is a budget device, it is actually slightly quieter than this device. So, you know, I can give Ayaneo props for making a very good budget device, but when you start getting up into these premium territories, everything has to be perfect when you're going to price things this way. And by the way, one thing that I mentioned about this device compared to the Ayaneo Pocket Air Mini is that the heft on this, okay, actually almost feels lighter than the heft that's on this. This thing it feels very substantial in the hands. This thing is not light as a feather. It is small, but it is not light as a feather, okay? So let's go ahead and do some size comparisons real quick. So here it is next to the Ayaneo Pocket Air Mini, and this is a better shot because it's from above. But as you can see, the Ayaneo Pocket S Mini is slightly wider, but the Ayaneo Pocket Air Mini has those chunky grips on it. Okay, so next up we have the Ayaneo Pocket S Mini on the top and the Anbernic RG476H on the bottom. And the Pocket S Mini has a 4.2-inch display, but the Anbernic has actually got a 4.7-inch display that runs basically the same resolution. And so if you were looking for something with a larger display to play your retro games, then the Anbernic 476H may actually be the way for you to go. But if you're still looking to get up into those higher territories of a lot more PS2, Gamecube, Nintendo Switch with video out and things like that, then you definitely want to stick with the Ayaneo Pocket S Mini out of this comparison. And just for giggles, I figured I'd get all of these 4x3 devices together in a shot together. And so we're still waiting on my Retroid Pocket Nova. However, I did get good news that it is finally actually starting to ship now. So when I get that device, obviously there's going to be a huge breakdown with all these 4x3 consoles. Okay, so next I figured we'd go ahead and run a sound test real quick with some Alien 3 on the Sega Genesis. And we got these two bottom firing speakers here. Okay, so we're going to see how well that pans out for us. Give us just a second here. That's maxed out. And so, not exactly the loudest thing in the world. You know, I'd figure it'd be that quiet if it was just a mono speaker, but the fact that that's dual speakers and they're that quiet is kind of underwhelming. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and get into our typical battery of game testing that we do. By the way, the SD card slot on this one is located on the side of the device for anyone who wanted to know that information. But, looking at it, I'm not as sensitive to things like screen ghosting and things like that because when Russ did this video, which everybody loves Russ. I love Russ, but he said he noticed a bunch of ghosting and things like that. Now I'm not one of these people that's actually sensitive to things like that. So to me, this just looks like a regular old Game Boy. But the Game Boy had a lot of ghosting itself back on original hardware. So for some people, they might say, "Hey, that's not ghosting, that's retro." Okay, to test Game Boy Color, I figured I'd jump into the manliest game I could find, Alice in Wonderland. Never in my life have I ever played this. Although I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I actually am kind of impressed by the graphics on this for this to be a Game Boy Color game. Hold on, let me see. I just want to see if I can I want to see how well the platforming is on this little Game Boy Color game right here. Look at me go. Yes, I am Alice. I am in Wonderland right now. Okay, this might actually be fun and I might be having too much fun doing this. So I'm going to the next system. All right, so here's some Game Gear with Chakan, the Forever Man. Most people just play the Sega Genesis version of this game, which is absolutely hard. Okay, I grew up playing that game. I never beat it. It stomped a mud hole in me every time. I did like the power-ups, though. I thought they were really cool. So the Game Gear route might actually be the way that I should go because maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that I could actually beat it. It might not be as hard. But yeah, so this is Game Gear 4x3 content for you right here. Alright, I figure we'll try out some platforming skills next with some Mega Man 2 for the NES. And the little blue bomber's looking all good, man. He's gonna go kick some robot booty holes today. They only made like 9 million of these Mega Man games, and I made on every flipping console just about, I think. I mean, we got a Mega Man on Game Boy, we got Mega Man on NES, we got Mega Man on PS1, Super Nintendo, all kind of Mega Man. Alright, so next up, jumping into the 16-bit genre with some Sega Genesis 4x3 content with Ristar, or Ristar, okay, however you want to pronounce that. But this game is, honest to goodness, this is kind of like, I think that they should have did a game where they combined this guy with Sonic the Hedgehog, because everything that he's doing reminds me of something straight out of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. It's almost like they were copying the same playbook, or maybe they had some of the same developers. I don't know. But, the thing is about this device so far, if you're noticing, is if you own the Ayaneo Pocket Air Mini, okay, then this Pocket S Mini, when it comes to these 4x3 games like this, these old school ones, remember the screen is essentially the same in both devices. And so you're not really getting an upgrade per se if all you're going to do is play retro games like the 8 and 16 and 32-bit eras and things like that. You're not getting anything new out of that. But if you are, how do I want to say this? If you are looking to play those higher end systems, PS2, GameCube, that's where you're really going to want to jump into this device. All right, so continuing in the 16-bit spirit right now, we're jumping into some Super NES gameplay with Super Punch-Out. Okay, now I was always more the NES guy, okay, so I like the original Punch-Out better. Call me crazy, but I really knew my stuff when it came to the original Punch-Out. This one, I actually felt kind of lost when I jumped up to it. But, as usual, 4x3 content of the retro systems is going to play wonderfully on this device. Now here we are with some Sonic Advance 3, and if you're paying attention, you can see that it just barely has some borders up on the top and bottom for Game Boy Advance, which is 3x2. But once again, power of this device is going to just eat right through these games. And the thing I will say for this device, though, thinking about it now, is that with the all-glass display, especially if you've got the black one. It actually kind of hides the borders a little bit. I mean, it's not an OLED. It's not as good of an illusion as it is with something like, say, the Retroid Pocket 5 or something like that. But it does still do a pretty good job. And so Game Boy Advance is going to look pretty good on this screen. Okay, so here we are with some PS1, and, PS1 games are going to look fantastic on here. That's a 4x3 system, and, all the games that you can basically throw at it, you're going to be able to upscale them all the way to the full display, basically the full 960p of this display. And, once you get out of the old school retro systems, if the whole ghosting thing was a big thing to you, when you start moving up into more 3D based systems, then you don't see this stuff as much. And I think that this actually looks really, really nice. Okay, so N64 on this device is just going to straight up shine. Once again, another beautiful 4x3 system, and being able to max out the resolution on this display for all your N64 games. Now, the Ayaneo Pocket Air Mini could do a lot of N64, and you can upscale plenty of games to the maximum of the display. However, I don't think that you can do every last one of them. I don't think the chipset was powerful enough to do all of the most demanding games maxed out. So this is where you start seeing that difference in power make a difference. Now, just to show you that power doesn't equal everything, though, I always have to try and find games that don't always run perfect. And so if you notice there was some artifacting here on Mario Golf 64 right there in the beginning. And you see that right there in that transition. And then now you see it again here on the map select. And then when you get into gameplay, it kind of goes in and out. Now, you can change the renderer, which is going to drop it down to native display, and you can probably get this game to work perfectly without all these graphical glitches. But I'm just trying to show you that even with all that extra added horsepower, there are still outliers out there, even some popular games on the N64 that on this 4x3, unfortunately, with this handheld, are not going to run 100% properly. Okay, so here we are with some Sega Dreamcast playing The Last Blade 2. I actually tested this on a different video recently, and I thought that it was a really cool fighting game, and so I wanted to test it some more because I wanted to kind of try and dive into it, see if I could figure out the special moves without diving into a strategy guide or looking up an FAQ for this kind of stuff. Because I love fighting games. I love fighting arcade games, and I really like the weapons-based combat games. This one reminds me a lot of Samurai Showdown. Now, here we are jumping into some PSP gameplay, and you can see that it's obviously going to have the borders on the top and the bottom because, this is not a 16:9 system. However, you can still run these games at, ridiculous resolutions, and you can still do video out as well. And so if you wanted to play these games on a big screen TV and then change the aspect ratio, that's on you. That's your choice. Okay, the option is there. But playing them in this, like this on a handheld, maybe if you want to, you can go into the options and you can change to like 3x2 or something like that. That way you could still play them on this and still, it still looks pretty decent. Alright, so now we jump into another 4x3 system with some Gamecube and Pokemon Gale of Darkness. Okay, so let's go into the comments on this one and let's see which one of you guys can turn me back into a Pokemon fan, because I know Pokemon is very popular the world over right now. But the thing is at some point, for whatever reason, I just stopped watching it, I enjoyed the show when I was in high school, and then, Dragon Ball Z came on and I never looked back from there. Okay, so let's see which one of you guys will say, hey man, you got to get back into it, bro. Now here's where we officially separate the men from the boys, okay? We have ARM SX2 as our PlayStation 2 emulator now, and believe you me, I still use Nether for a lot of games, okay? However, ARM SX2 is making strides in leaps and bounds. Battlefield 2 was one of the most notoriously hard games for me to ever get working on Nether SX2. And when I played it, I had to turn the rendering down on it. I had to do all kinds of hacks and everything else. And we're talking about with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 device. We're talking about I was using my Odin 2 Portal trying to get it running with the base model, the 8 gig model. And bear in mind, by the way, the Pocket S Mini that I'm using right now is also the 8 gig model. And yet here we are, just jumping right through the title screens of this very difficult, very demanding PlayStation 2 game. Okay, I was getting to the point where I wanted to play this game so badly that I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just play the PC version instead. But now that we've got certain games that may not be optimized on AetherSX2 that are very well optimized on ARM SX2. And so if you want to try your hand with this new emulator with ARM SX2, it is definitely well worth it. So let's get into some gameplay. Okay, so here we are in the very beginning of the game where we're parachuted out of the sky or what have you. And, we're just getting our weapons, learning how to work everything. And you can see here, I'm already swapping through characters and learning where to go on the map and all this and that, on-screen tutorial garbage or whatever. But as you can see, this is rendering very good right now. I am running this at a full frame rate. And so, like I said, if you wanted a way to play this particular game, like I said, get you a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 device or a G3X Gen 2 device like this one, and go ahead and have yourself a ball, man. Get out there and try this new emulator, this ARM SX2, because you're going to find out that a lot of the games that weren't running on Ether or Nether are going to be able to run on this handheld. Alright, so here we are rendering another very, very difficult game to run, and we're using ARM SX2 to do it. And in this game, this is called The Getaway. Okay, normally there's a lot of problems with the people in the car getting rendered properly and different things like that. However, this device not the device, but the emulator itself has so many different advanced settings that you can go into and you can fix things, you can speed things up, or you can drop the rendering or whatever. As you can see, I'm running this at 2x for this game. So this is a harder to run game. I've got the display stretched out to the full 4:3. Okay, but when you get down to where you have your cycle skip and different things of that nature, that's where you actually have to change a few things to make this game work properly, to make it as good as it can possibly be. But other than that, as you can see right here, I've got it set. I don't have any frame skip on whatsoever, but I do have a maximum EE cycle rate of -3 and an EE cycle skip of +1 here. And that's how I got this game to render the way that I've got it rendering right now at full speed. And as you can see, it looks great at 2x native resolution on this 4:3 display. So ARM SX2 is where it's at for a lot of these harder games right now. But just realize this, your device will run a little bit hotter using this emulator, and will probably eat up more battery using this emulator as well. And lastly, for PS2, I have here Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus. Once again, this is one of those games that is extremely hard to run, and AetherSX2, NetherSX2, I mean, unless you had like the maximum RAM model of the Odin or whatever, it was one of those games that was really hard to get play on an ARM device. And now here we are. This is a standard 8 gig Snapdragon G3X Gen 2, and this game is running beautifully. I know right now all you're seeing is the cutscenes, but believe me, I've actually gotten into gameplay as well beyond these cutscenes. And once you actually get into the gameplay, this game is full speed. Okay, and I've got this at the max resolution of this display. So Dirge of Cerberus, finally playable on an ARM device. Okay, so last up on the docket here, we have some PC emulation with Watch Dogs. And this is where I'm going to say that I would cut this device off, because even though this device can run PC games, and there are plenty of PC games that are in 4:3 that, are pretty good. But the problem is as soon as you start running a demanding PC game, the fan on this thing kicks into high gear to keep this thing cooled off. And it is just going to be loud if you want to keep trying to play. And not only that, but the device actually does, because of the material that the Michelle is made of, it gets pretty warm in the hands. And so like right now, this thing's starting to heat up almost to an uncomfortable point on the back of my hands right now. And so I have other devices that I would rather play this on where I can get my hands away from the heat and not have to worry about this sort of thing. But I will say this, that the Snapdragon G3X Gen 2 shares all of the same turnip drivers and things, support like that, as what the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 has. The only difference is the emulators themselves and the games themselves might not be as compatible with the actual chipset. And so don't go thinking that, oh, well, it's the same chipset, we're just going to play all the same games, because even with the same turnip driver support, it's going to behave just slightly different. And so just be aware of that. And anyways, that about wraps it up for this particular emulation showcase and review. I think that this device is pretty good in the space, but at the same time, because of the price point and the fact that we now have the Retroid Pocket Nova out and is charging about $100 less than what this device is charging, and it has a better display. I'm waiting on mine to come, so this is going to kind of date this video a little bit, but when my Retroid Pocket Nova gets here, I do plan on doing a direct comparison with this device, performance for performance, and we'll see which device you can actually push and which one is going to be more comfortable temperature-wise and everything else in the hands. Is it all just a bunch of hype? Or, is the Retroid Pocket going to be the king? And, I'm going to guess and go ahead and say that the Retroid Pocket is probably going to be better just based on the shell material alone. It's not going to cook my fingers, but we'll just have to save that for when the device gets here. Anyways, I'm Josh the Fifth Wheel Gamer, and I am out of here.
Like and subscribe for more great content, share and comment down below.